Oh, getting old, making noises every time I move. Welcome back to the channel, folks. Following on from last week's vid about the GoPro audio when I'm motovlogging, loads of you have asked, what settings do I actually use on the GoPro itself? So this week, we're going to cover exactly that, the settings I use on my GoPro when I'm riding the bike. So if that's of interest to you, grab your GoPro and let's crack on.
Down in the dirt.
Right, we're standing up, ready for action. I probably shouldn't have worn a grey top against a grey background, should I? You can probably just see my cranium bobbing along here. By the way, t-shirts available in the shop, TeapotOne.com. Right, grab your GoPro, switch her on, and let's crack on. Down the bottom, you'll see a little tab which tells you what settings you're in at the moment. If you tap that, you can see there that certainly on the Hero 9, I have loads of different presets already programmed in on here. Oh, this Hero 9, the screen is terrible. The one I use for motovlogging on the bike, funnily enough, is called Bike. I tap that, and that will select that one. If I tap it again, it takes me back to this screen, and you can see on the right-hand side, there's these little pencils. Tap the little pencil icon, and you can now edit these presets. So let's go right from the very top. You can see that I'm in 2.7K at 60 frames per second. The reason I go at 2.7K is twofold. One, the 4K files are huge and the GoPro gets hot, but again, doesn't matter too much when you're out on the bike because there's plenty of air to cool it down. However, the file size can be a limiting factor, and if you're out recording all day, if you're away on a trip, something like that, then your SD card will fill up pretty quick. So I film at 2.7. I get the crispness of the added resolution, but 2.7 at 60 frames per second allows me to film in super view. On the Hero 9, you can only film 4K at 60 frames per second in the 4:3 format. I like super view because it opens the top and the bottom of the image up, and you get a much more realistic POV, point of view, for riding the bike. You see more above and below the handlebars, so to speak. I like the crispness you get from 60 frames per second. And the other thing is, occasionally you see things when you're out and about on the bike. For example, I did it when I was in the Picos. We came around the corner and there's an eagle just taking off. At 60 frames per second, I can slow that down by 50%. At 30, that would have just been a total blur. At 60, you get a little bit more detail at 60. Again, it's a personal choice. You might prefer to film at 24, 25 or 30. That is the resolution and frame rates. Next one along, lens. This is the one I was talking about. With this, you can have super view, and you can have that all the way down to narrow, like a very narrow field of vision. You can have linear. I use linear for my podcast videos, and sometimes for the point of view, if I'm just holding a GoPro and talking to it, I'll switch that to linear and just chat away to the camera. That way you don't get any of the warped horizons or anything like that. So yeah, I set that at super view for motovlogging. Next one along, hyper smooth. The Hero 9, not only does it have hyper smooth 3.0, it's also got boost, and I whack it on boost. Again, it's up to you what you go for. You might just want to use the standard hyper smooth 3.0. You might even want to turn it off. It's entirely what you want from your image. I like the buttery smoothness of boost, so that's what I go for. Schedule capture, we don't need to worry about that. Duration, hindsight, that's the things like, say you can't be bothered to wait for a sunrise or a sunset or something like that, but you know it's going to be at a set time, so you can just program this in for the GoPro to switch on, start recording. You can set the duration of how long it will record or how many pictures, etc. You can do all that on here. We don't need it for motovlogging. Hindsight, again, personal taste. I don't activate that for when I'm on the bike. Hindsight is just, the camera is constantly recording all the time. It's just looping. And when you hit the record button, then I think it will, it grabs something like 30 seconds or 15 seconds before you've hit that button, basically to try and make sure you never miss a shot. For motovlogging, I don't bother with that. Timer and zoom, again, we don't bother with them. Keep on going down and you come to Pro Tunes. Now this is where the meat and two veg, so to speak, are of the GoPro. It's a pretty powerful little camera once you get into these settings. If you've watched my audio fix vid for the popping and crackling that we seem to get a lot of the time when we wear the camera out on the bike with a mic, this is where the fix is. First off, bitrate. Now I set the bitrate at high. You want it at high. You want as much information as possible coming into this camera. So whack that at high. Shutter, set it at auto. When we're out on the bike, things are changing all the time. Light values are changing all the time. We do not have the luxury of being able to sit and set all the settings up all the time. It just doesn't happen like that on the bike. So set that to auto. Your EV comp. This will normally be, by standard, be set at 0. The GoPro has a habit of overexposing the image. So when you look up at the sky, say on a bright day, or if there's clouds up in the sky, a lot of the time they'll be blown out. It means that they're just like brilliantly white. Any image that is brilliantly white or totally black, there's no information in those parts of the image. If it's really black, there's nothing, there's no detail there at all. And if it's really white, there's no detail there at all. Ideally, you don't want to have that in your stills or in your video. So what I do with the EV comp is I drop it to minus 0.5. Some of the mountain bike channels out there, and I think even Motonosity, he drops it to -1. I find that's just a little bit too dark for me personally. You can lighten it all in post if you want. The vast majority of folks like yourselves out there, you're probably not going to want to muck about too much in post when you're editing this. You want the best image possible coming straight out the camera. That's what this is going to give you. I would set it minus 0.5 and it will just reduce the likelihood of blowing out any of the highlights. Okay, so here's some example bits of footage with your EV comp at 0, at minus 0.5 and at -1. Next down, white balance. White balance is key when you're filming, it really is. But again, on the bikes with us, if you don't know what you're doing, just leave it set to auto. If you do know what you're doing, then by all means get in here and alter the white balance to whatever it is you think suits the conditions that you're going out in. But I'd suggest, again, if you are out on a trip, if you're covering some serious miles over the course of the day, you're going to have to constantly alter that white balance value in order to get the right image. So I just leave mine set to auto. Again, it's a personal choice. You can fiddle around with this in post if you know what you're doing. But again, if you don't worry about it. Set white balance to auto. ISO min, leave it 100. The next one is one we will change. ISO max. Generally, this would not go above 800. However, with the new GoPros, you can whack this up to 1600. If the conditions allow, you could even drop that to 3200. The problem when you go to 3200 for sure on the GoPros is in the darker lighting conditions. At 3200, you're going to get a lot more noise, and the stability, that hyper smooth boost that we have, that will start to affect the image quite considerably. I've found with 1600, it's the best of both worlds. That's the one I go for. So here's a couple of examples with your ISO set at 800, 1600 and 3200. Tell me what you think.
This is the GoPro, pretty much standard. There'll probably just be subtle changes, which again are entirely personal. You might find you prefer your footage bog standard out of the camera, and that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. This is set to 3200. Now you might notice as we come through these darker places, you'll start to get a little bit more noise in the image.
Sharpness. Now this is contentious. The GoPros have a lot of contrast and they have a lot of sharpness generally in the image. A lot of people out there don't like that sharpness that the GoPro will produce, so they'll drop that to low. A lot of mountain bike channels out there, they'll suggest drop the sharpness to low, so have a little play around with it yourself and see what you think. You have low, medium and high. In fact, we've got some examples here. Let me know what you think.
This is sharpness set at low. This is sharpness set at medium. And this is sharpness set to high. So these have all been exactly the same settings. The only thing I'm changing is the sharpness. So medium is my standard, going to low, and now trying high. I used to use high all the time.
So for me, I normally film with the sharpness at high, to be honest, because I really do like that crispness of the sharpness at high. I'm going to give it a bash at medium as we go into the summer and I do some more trips. I just want to see. I want to see what all this fuss is about medium and low. Colour. Again, this comes down to whether you know what you're doing in post or not. If you don't, whack it on GoPro and leave. If you do know what you're doing, when it comes to editing your videos and you're happy, comfortable with colour correction and colour grading, you want that set to flat, and also you want to specify your white balance as well for when you're filming, because that will give you total control over everything in your image. For us mere mortals, just whack it on GoPro, because I personally quite like that saturated, vibrant colour look that the GoPro gives you. Again, personal choice. If you haven't seen the audio fix vid I did for the popping and crackling, you can check that out up here. So let's head out on a bike and I'll show you what this will actually give you.
Take your footage to the next level, try and have a little fiddle. Hey, have a wee fiddle with the settings. If you want me to do a vid on the use of ND filters, I can do that. I don't know, I didn't really like that sort of motion blur effect in the footage. I like the crisp, clean sharpness that the GoPro gives you, to be honest. But if you want a video on them, then I can try and do one, or there are plenty of videos out there on the use of ND filters for motovlogging. I can certainly point you in the right direction of them. In fact, Motonosity, he did a vid. His settings were a little bit different to mine. He has a very cinematic, stylized look to his footage. It's probably why he's got nearly 1 million subscribers. Maybe there's a lesson to be learnt there for me. But you tell me what you think. What do you think of this footage? What have you thought of the vid? Any good? It's all down to individual taste. One person's mud is another person's soap. But anyway folks, hope you've enjoyed this one. I hope you're all sticking in there. Look after those that you love. Get on out there and live your life. See you in the next one. Hoo-ah!